So on that note of the death of a story, we are almost at the end of the hour. So I want to thank everyone for this insightful conversation. We can talk for hours on this fascinating topic. But I'd like to end this discussion the way we begin with a tour de table. And the intention for this podcast is to help each other become the self-authoring leader of our lives through meaningful action. So let's pass the mic and share what you've heard today that will perhaps inspire you to do something differently than the way you did it prior to this conversation, or anything that you feel was left unsaid, or any last thoughts. And I'm going to start by sharing my own takeaways to give you a moment to collect your thoughts. And Aditi, you'll be the last one to end this conversation. I've learned a lot. I really enjoyed how, Aditi, you mentioned that we're hijacking our body and our brain by not allowing emotions. I also really strongly related to this escape story. I feel that I'm on the run. And this is why I've arrived to this question about, can I live without a personal narrative? And although I recognize that stories have a lot of values when it comes to bringing people together and creating a collective story, whether it's a family, a relationship, or a group of people working together. But I think my aha moment was when a few of you clearly said that the hero story that we've been told since we were children and generation from generation, this is the story that needs to be rewritten. And in the last podcast, I think we were talking about the power of communities, and the whole group were talking about how do we move the me to the we. And again, I'm finding this thread again on that particular topic. And that makes me very excited. Not only because I've been trying to let go of my own story, I've tried to wake up in the morning and not focus on who I think I am. And that was liberating. But I didn't know there was a space, it was empty. And I think this egoless work, which really comes through the acceptation that we're a nobody, is very challenging, because we haven't been raised by thinking that we were nobodies. We thought we were important. But it is definitely liberating. And I'm going to take this loser story with me a little bit more deeper and see how I feel to tell myself, you're a loser. So thank you. I really enjoyed this discussion. So why don't we pass the mic, and Lisa, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful threads in this conversation. It's hard to choose. I think that last point you brought up again about what Jonathan was saying about, learning to be a loser and embracing being a loser, I think is really powerful. And I also really like this idea of what you were saying, Aditi, about, wouldn't it be funny if I wasn't the protagonist in my life, but it was my pet cat or something? Wouldn't that be brilliant? Or, the mycelium, some kind of minute thing in nature, and it's really not even to do with us. So I think, I also am really struck by this idea of the death of story and ego death, and again reminded of how challenging and how painful it can be to kind of move through that. And I believe that conversations, dialogues like these are a currency for change. And so I'm really touched by the opportunity to be part of a conversation like this, and for people listening to a conversation like this, and perhaps it will help spark a new perspective for people listening as well, in terms of, wow, what stories have been running my life, and could there be a different story that might better serve who I want to be, or the kind of life that I want to live. So yeah, I'm leaving with lots of rich thoughts. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lisa. Jonathan?
There are a lot of illusions in story. I don't mean allusions, but illusions, things that we believe to be true and we discover are not true. Because truth isn't about the facts, it's about what we can hold on to. It's about what endures, even when we lose things. And the thing that I've heard in this conversation is that we have been going collectively and individually through a process of disillusionment. And it hurts because we imagine that the illusion is who we are. If we are like Lilith, however, we have no choice but to find out what we're not and to give up those things piece by piece, one by one, until we see who we're left with. This is happening for a lot of people right now in terms of their jobs, their businesses, closing down. But this doesn't mean that we're going to achieve some kind of reality and great enlightenment about how things actually are. Because in the end, we're going to have to take up a new story, a new feeling. We're going to have to adopt new illusions. Because that's the way you live. You step forward believing that the ground will hold you up. What I would like to see us doing is to learn to live in a way, having lost so much, to understand that what we're doing is an illusion. It's a play, it's a role, it's a pretend. And to go forward anyway, but without that rigid certainty that this must be and must always be.
Like this idea of living your life as a play. Definitely brings some perspective. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Aditi?
Yeah, I love this idea, Jonathan, that we still hang on to story, but we acknowledge that it serves a slightly different function than we initially thought. And there was something, I mean, when you said the thing about maybe the end of the story is actually the beginning, I think we have to acknowledge that these cycles of death and rebirth are just a part of being human. And that is something that we have been denying for a really, really long time. We don't want to acknowledge that darkness. We don't want to acknowledge that death and loss and grief are a part of the cycle, and we will emerge on the other side of that with a new rebirth. And then, Lisa, the thing that you brought up that has been coming up in my mind so much, what you said about the mouse shaking off the trauma, I think living through this embodied experience, when I'm stuck with something, when I have emotions that are really intense, like rage or sadness, I have learned, I have this teacher, Kate Shayla, who's a somatic shaman and dancer, and I just dance it out of my system. And that's because I live in a world of words that just can really corrode your brain. Words, language, story. One of my friends refers to it as story pollution. We're just constantly inundated with stories, our own, others, and sometimes you have to remove yourself from story and just go directly with a body into a wordless place to get to the heart of whatever truth you're trying to get to.
Very well. That was, and on that note, I would like to invite listeners of yours to really reflect on this discussion and maybe ask themselves what emotion could they be addicted to when they look at the repeating stories of their own lives? And hopefully they may find something out of it. So thank you again very much for this wonderful discussion. Really appreciated it.